What's up, everybody? I'll give you a tour of the garage. This is a 20 by 20, and just thought I'd give you a bit of a before because it's an absolute mess. What I'm gonna try to do today is install this heater up in this corner. So I bought some supplies yesterday, and I'll walk you through what I've got and how I'm gonna do it. I had an electrician install a 5,000 watt in my previous garage. This garage is a little bit bigger, so I went with the 7,500, which is a little bit different. And after I saw the electrician do it, I figured I can do it myself. I do have a sub panel in the corner there, which helps out tremendously. So I'll walk you through putting in a new breaker in there and how to run the wire and what I'm gonna do. Okay, so this is my sub panel. And as you can see, not too much in it. There's a 50 amp that was for an old hot tub that is no longer here, so this one's actually empty. There's a cord, but it just kind of dead ends. This 50 amp goes to a plug behind the bike, so I'll probably use that for an electric car plug-in down the road. This 15 amp services a few of the plugs in the garage, and that's it. The rest of it, like the garage door opener and some of the lights, run off of a breaker inside the house, so I'll show you that at the main panel. But all I gotta do here is take off these 4 screws and this whole plate will come off, and I'll show you the guts. Okay, so I've got the cover off, so you can see that. So those are those 4 screws. These are just little knockouts, so as I add breakers, I can kind of notch these out to make room. So I'll end up having to notch 2 because this new 40 amp breaker that I bought will take up 2 slots. Inside here, so this is the main power coming in, so that's from the house, so that's live. So before I touch any of this, I'll go shut off power in the house, so I'll show you that. I'm gonna stick it on this left-hand side, just because the wires are 8 gauge, so they're big like these guys. So I just don't want to cram up this side. I've got good access over here. The wire is going to be coming from up top here, so I'll probably use one of these knockouts inside, come straight down, have a little extra wire, and then come in on the side here. So when you're planning how much wire to buy, just make sure you've got extra. It's better to have extra than not enough. So you can see these guys actually did a pretty good job of leaving extra, so if you make changes, you can shift up these loops. I'm no electrician, but I've done enough to know that it sucks when you're short wire. So yeah, I'll show you the main panel, shut things off, and then I'll show you how to install this 40 amp. Okay, this is inside my house. This is my main panel, and as you can see, there's a breaker here for the garage sub panel. So that'll shut off everything that I'm working on in there. Now, really keep in mind, kind of like my situation, like I've got live things in the garage still. So there's the garage, some outdoor plugins that are still live out there. I'm gonna keep those on because that'll, I think, give me some light in there. But yeah, before you work on any kind of electrical, always make sure it's off. Okay, so we're back in the garage. So this panel is now completely dead. I'll show you how to install this. So typically they kind of hook in on the side with the terminals there. So you kind of clip it in that side and then push it against the metal brackets there. I guess I can show you that. So those little hooks are what grab on those gray little latches. So that's what kind of holds it on, and then that's where it'll get its electricity from, in there. Okay, so that snapped in pretty easy. Sorry, this is my first time doing a video. I don't have a tripod or anything to actually show you me snapping it in. But it's not going anywhere now. My wires, like I said, will then come into here. I'll screw them down. This is currently off, so that'll be flicked to on once everything is connected. And that's it. And actually, one thing I'll mention that's really important. So the brand of the breaker needs to match your panel, or it's not going to snap in or fit. So this is a Simmons, I believe. I don't, oh yeah, there you can actually see it there, Simmons. It's really easy to tell what type of panel you have because it'll say right on it there. So when you're in Home Depot or whatever, just make sure that when you're buying your breaker, you match the brand of your panel there. And then when I show you the heater, I'll explain why I've got a 40 amp breaker. But that's it. I'm gonna keep the power off. I've got light in here, but I'll show you the supplies I bought and how I'm gonna run the cable for this thing. Okay, I'll show you some of the supplies I picked up. So this is 8 gauge wire. I think it's called like 3/8 because it's got 3 wires inside. A little hard to see before I open it up. How I knew to buy 8 gauge is in the instructions. It actually tells you what gauge to get. I think the smaller the gauge, the bigger the wire. So 8 gauge is getting pretty big. Usually you'd use these ties to kind of connect wires to outlets and things. I was freaking out because I didn't really have the correct size, but I realized I don't even need any because both my connection at the breaker and connection to the heater are just these nice screw connections. So I don't have to worry about that. What else did I get? So when buying this, you can buy just bare wire, but keep in mind the bare wire's okay for anything kind of behind the studs going up in your ceiling. But as soon as it comes out into the exposed garage, it needs to be protected either by like some sort of conduit. So this is like a steel braided conduit. You can get plastic, all sorts of things. This is flexible, so it's really easy to work with. I'm gonna drywall and insulate and build cabinets and things. So I don't need this to be steel braided the whole way, but it was just easier this way. So I'm gonna mount the heater up in this corner somewhere. So I need enough of it to come down to the heater, up into the ceiling, down the wall, and over to there. I figured 12 feet was enough. I'm thinking I should be good. Floor to ceiling here is 10 feet. So I'm only about half that height to the breaker, and you know the heater's going to be up in the ceiling, so I think I've got plenty. As it kind of goes along the roof and the studs, I'm going to use these little brackets to just mount it, keep it all flush, neat and tidy. These are 1/2 inch. When you're in the store, you can just make sure that they, fit around nicely. And then I bought these 2 little connection points. So what these are for is you install these prior, and what it is it'll go in one of these knockouts, and it tightens on either side. And then once you feed this wire through, you then tighten this screw and it'll close down that clamp, securing your wire so it's not wiggling, it's not going anywhere. And there's one here, and then I'll put one in the sub panel as well. The steel braided end, I'll end up cutting it off where it enters the heater and where it enters the sub panel. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet, but once I figure that out, I'll show you. Again, this is the heater I bought. This is actually, it's flipped upside down. So this is that Dyna-Glo 7500 watt. It's got an internal thermostat, but the nice thing about this unit is you can actually hook up an external thermostat to here. It's a little complicated though, because the wattage of this is starting to get pretty high. You need a special thermostat, or at least one with high amperage. So I'm trying to figure that out. I'll probably do a separate video once I figure out the thermostat. But for today, I'm just gonna hook it up. And how it'll work is I can kind of flip between 7500 watt, 5000 watt, and just kind of increase heat manually. That's that. This is the mounting bracket. So I'm gonna have to run a 2x4 or some other structure to mount it to. And it's gonna be at an angle, so I gotta figure out how I'm gonna run that. And eventually that'll get insulation and drywall. So I'm gonna try to be smart about it so it's not a pain in the ass when I go to do that work. Normally I would probably insulate and drywall and do the heater after, but I just need heat to work in here, so I'm kind of jumping ahead. Yeah, and then inside the manual, I just thought I'd show you a few things here. It's always good to read this. I know it's easy to skip over this stuff, but like for example, this heater, this will show you your amperage. So because we're above 30, that's why I went with that 40 amp breaker. A couple other things to note is this will tell you how far you got to keep your heater away from walls, how high off the ceiling, tips for how to angle it, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'll make sure to kind of maintain these distances. I'm gonna probably keep these as open shelves when I drywall. So I'm lucky and I'll be able to kind of tuck it in that corner pretty nice and tight to that post. And that's her. So next thing I'm gonna do is run this cable, basically just hang it loose behind the panel, up the wall, into the ceiling. I'll see if I gotta cut some holes back in there, and then I'll show you once that's all done. Okay, so this is up in the corner, up by the ceiling where the heater's gonna go. So my cable's gonna come up. I'm gonna probably hug the same corner that the old hot tub wire is running along. And I'll do the same thing. I'm just gonna cut a hole beside that. Go through both the 2x4s there. I'll run it up, and I'll probably have to make one more hole. Where are we? Right about here. Just keep in mind when you're cutting in structural things, like this is a truss for the roof. There's all sorts of guidelines for how big the holes can be, where to make them. Luckily I'm just cutting a 1-inch hole, so it's not very big, and I'm going to keep it right in the center. You don't want to be putting it on an edge where, you know, that can snap easily. So I'll keep that right in the middle, right there. And yeah, just make sure you're making a hole big enough to get your conduit through. And there she is. Now keep in mind, these type of bits make an absolute mess. I always forget about that. And there's my other hole. Now I made sure to put this hole somewhat tight to this 2x4 so that when I run the cable along here, I'll mount it here, and then it'll pop through here nicely, because it's tough to bend that stuff. That bigger wire becomes quite the pain. So that cable will come down, and then my heater's gonna, you know, sit in this corner here. So that should work out quite nice. And yeah, like I said, she gets messy. Now just thinking this through, I don't want this to be hanging up in the ceiling while I'm trying to feed it through the heater and be cutting conduit and trying to jam in wires. So what I think I'm gonna do is kind of pre-mount all this to the heater, or at least get things cut so that I know the proper length of everything, get the bracket that I had purchased, this little guy, set inside the heater, so it's all ready to go. So then I can drape this up in the ceiling. When I hang the heater, I can then just insert the cord and it's ready to rock. So I'll figure out how to cut this back and what length, and I'll show you how I did that. So I just thought I'd quickly show you this. So that's those knockouts. I just sort of whacked that with a hammer. You can use a screwdriver. You actually have to hit them pretty hard to knock them out. So then I've got this guy. It's probably a proper way, but I figure it's probably best to have this on the outside. So I'm gonna angle that, sorry, terrible with the camera. I'm gonna angle this screw at the back so it kind of looks nice. And then, sorry, I gotta put the camera down here. Then basically I just take that nut and I screw it onto there. And I'll see if I can set this up. Show you that. So that's on there, and then you can tighten that up, make sure this is nice and straight, and then so my conduit is gonna come into here, and then where my finger's sticking out, that's where I'll cut the metal sheathing off, and the bare wires can then come in and connect to there. So to cut this, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of figure out where I want to cut it, clamp it or hold it, and if I think if I spin the metal in the opposite direction, so I think if I spin it clockwise, it'll probably unravel, and then I can just snip the end, or snip the coil. I'll see if that works. I figured I would show this part. So yeah, I clamped it where I wanted to kind of break this. And then I just took sorry, it's a little out of focus, another set of pliers. And like I said, I pulled this clockwise and it just unravels. So now that it's unraveled, I can take some snips and just snip it nice without damaging the wire inside. And there she be. So yeah, I just had some tin snips. You can use whatever type of snips you have. This stuff cuts like butter. It's real thin. I think it's just like aluminum. Yeah, so there's the bare wire. I'll trim this paper off. And then this is kind of ready. I'll just make sure it all fits, but I'll leave it like this, string it up, and then I'll just insert this when I'm ready, when the heater's kind of hanging from the ceiling there. Okay, so I'm sitting up in the roof here, so I've fed it through here. Eventually, like I said, I'll mount it down here, but this stuff's really stiff, but you'll have to really work with it. I've fed it down the other hole that I cut, and essentially now I can just kind of work its way. Sorry for the camera jumping around. But I'll gradually just feed it down towards the sub panel, and then that prepped end will be hanging up by my hand here, ready to go into the heater. Okay, so we're back down by the panel. So like I said, originally I was gonna run this down and come through the top and kind of run the cord down here, but looking at it, I'm actually gonna kind of turn it and come in through the side and go right into the new breaker. Actually, shoot, I thought it was gonna be here, but it's already installed. So I'm coming in a little low, but that's okay. But I just thought I'd show you this knockout. So they're kind of interesting. They fit two sizes. So I've started to knock it out, but this is still too small. So now I've got to also knock out this inner ring. You got to hit these really hard. Like, don't be shy. I had to get a screwdriver and a hammer. I just thought I'd show you that. Yeah, so I was able to get that inner piece out, but yeah, it took a fair bit of work and some sort of prying at it, but now I've got a big enough hole to get my bracket similar to these guys on there. Okay, so I've cut back the sheathing, the conduit there, and I think I've got enough in here to hook up to the breaker, the ground, and the neutral. So I just got to cut these wires back, get it all hooked up, and I'll show you what that looks like. I've left this loose for now. I'll first make sure everything fits and can reach and has enough play. It's kind of funny, when I bought 12 meters of this or not 12 meters, 3 meters of this stuff, 12 feet, I thought I would have like a meter to spare, but she's tight running up the wall there, coming down. Once that goes into the heater, I don't know, I don't actually have a lot to play with. So yeah, always buy more wire than what you think you need. I think I lucked out, but man, I should have measured that a bit better. Okay, I was able to get the wires stripped. My wire cutters actually only go up to 10 gauge. So yeah, it was kind of a pain working with this bigger wire. Like, it's really stiff. It's actually quite a pain in the ass to work with. So just something to keep in mind, that, I don't know, it's always easier to have tools like this, I find. There's lots of tips and tricks on how to do this, but I just used the 10 size and just bit into it very gently and went around and was able to get a nice cut. But I'll hook all these up, show you what that looks like. I thought I'd just take a break here to kind of show you. I'm halfway through. So I kind of looked, and the furthest back, the toughest to reach, is the ground. So I snuck the ground wire in first. So you always want to make sure it comes all the way through and you've got a good connection when you tighten down. So that one's in there, it's not going anywhere. The white, I believe that's the neutral. Again, this wire is really fat and hard to work with, so I kind of pulled things out of my way. It's the furthest back, so that's why I'm installing that one first. And sometimes these strands can kind of separate a little bit, so just make sure they're nice and tight together. Figure out what angle you're going at and kind of pre-twist the wire so that it insets nice, and you're not fiddling with it when it's at the back there. But you can see kind of the wires are poking out the other side. I'm tightening down, not on the jacket of the wire, but on the actual copper. And she's nice and tight, she's not going anywhere. So I'll just tuck these wires back along the side so it's nice and clean. And then I'll connect my red and black to the new breaker. Okay, inserting my red wire, I realized that I had just stripped way too much off of these. I'll blame it on my shitty wire cutters not being the right size, but you're better to take off less and take a bit more if you need. But I didn't want a whole bunch of copper sticking out too far. It's probably even some sort of code saying how much you can have out, I don't know. But I just added some electrical tape so that I don't have too much copper sticking out. So that's all I've done there. And you can see that one I've added a bit of electrical tape. But I'll finish setting these, tighten up these screws, and that'll be that. Okay, I've got those both hooked up. I've tightened down the screws so these aren't going anywhere. The wires, I'm just going to make sure they're kind of tucked all out of the way of these brackets. Everything looks clean. I'll probably clean this out. I've got some sawdust that came down, but now that this is all good, I'm going to tighten down this so that this isn't going anywhere. And then I'm going to put the faceplate back on, get this all buttoned up, and next will be to mount the heater. Okay, so panel is back together here. like I said, before I threw it back on, these two knockouts were still there, so I pried those off. So now it's looking nice and clean. Obviously this is in slot 7 and 9, so I'll label this as my heater. Don't be those people that don't label things and drive everyone crazy. But I don't know about you, I hate electrical, so just having this back on makes me feel better already. Okay, let's get this heater installed. Okay, so I was actually going to go buy some lag bolts, but for anyone who's buying this exact heater, tucked away in the bracket, there is a little pack with some lag bolts. So on the sides, these little guys will hook into these clips, and then these lag bolts will go in up through the top wherever I decide to mount it. Now I want it at an angle because I want it to be in the corner and to kind of blow to that corner of the garage. So I won't be able to put a straight 2x4 across, so I'll probably end up putting 2 2x4s, maybe even 3, I don't know, excuse me, to catch a lag bolt as I've got that angle. And of course, brand new garage, well, brand new house. I've got no supplies, I got no 2x4s, so I'm gonna go pick up some lumber, cut those pieces, and I'll show you what that looks like when I get back from Home Depot. Hopefully my only trip today. Okay, so what I've done, just using this big square, I've drawn a 45-degree angle kind of coming from the corner of the garage, so that kind of shows those two lines would kind of point to the corner. So I want the heater sitting at a perfect 45. So to do that, I'd basically want this center lug nut within those two lines. So what I think I'm going to do is I'll grab this truss with this lug nut. I'll grab the center with where I've kind of marked out, and then the right one will be over there. So I'll just make sure this is at a 45 degree with the lines that I drew. Or sorry, a 90 degree. So yeah, so I just need to get some 2x4s in there to catch those floating holes at the moment. So that should be pretty straightforward, actually. Alrighty, so I got my 2x4s. I've cut 2, and the only reason I cut 2 was because my bracket's gonna be at an angle, so I'm gonna put in 2 lag bolts, and so I want one to land in a stud each. I figured out where the holes are gonna be to keep this at a 45-degree angle. So I'm just gonna permanently mount it fixed. You can just put one lag bolt in the center and have it swivel, but I don't want this thing kind of bouncing around. So where I've marked these little holes, I'm just gonna pre-drill some holes for the lags. And then for lag bolts, I typically like to just use a socket set and just gently crank them into place so that they bite into lots of wood and don't kind of strip anything. So I'll get this thing mounted and give you a peek. All right, there's my bracket mounted. It's pretty straightforward. There's 2 holes on either side of that bracket. So the lowest hole will be for the this that actually holds the unit, and then this upper one is for being able to change the angle on the unit. So I'll get this thing thrown up there and show you what that looks like. Okay, I've got her up there. Might be worth getting a friend if you're not strong enough to hold the unit while you get both sides of the bolts in, but it's not too bad. So I put the 2 bolts on either side that hold the unit, so I put those first. And then I've tilted it down so it's kind of pointing down into the garage. So you can see I've got it on the second setting. You can go one more to angle it almost right at the floor. And then you just screw that in to keep it tight. It's got these little louvers. I think that's what they're called, louvers. So those will be able to also direct the air, and it's actually pretty slick. They're somewhat sturdy, so I think once you've got them set to where you like them, they should stay. And then the rest of the stuff is just for when the unit's actually on. So next, I just got to get this electrical inserted into the unit. So to access the bottom, it's on the table. I had it flipped upside down. You just undo this little screw and you'll be able to access the guts. So I'll pop that off, strip these, get them hooked up, and then I'll show you what the hookup looks like. Okay, I've got it all hooked up here. See if this helps. So what I did was there was no neutral, so I just put a I don't know what those are called, but I just terminated it. Red and black are in, and then I've attached the ground. There's a little grounding screw back in the back. So I'll tighten this down, make sure this is nice and tight. Like I said, I thought I had enough cable. I barely had enough. I probably would have liked this to have come all the way over to here and then straight down to the unit. But I'll see how this ends up coming, but it'll probably come out of the ceiling and loop down to the heater. Not a huge deal, but for aesthetics, I don't know, not the best. But yeah, I think the unit's gonna look pretty good. Like I said, when I do the insulation and drywall, unfortunately, I'll probably have to demount it and put it back up, but at least I'll have heat to do all that work. I'm gonna go flick the breaker on inside, and then once I get this unit powered up, I'll flick it on and show you how it works. Alrighty, I'm back. I have flicked the sub panel back on, so this is now live. This is the heater. So here goes nothing. No sparks. Anticlimactic. Let's see. Oh, we have power light, which is good. And let's see. So the fan kicked on. Actually, I can smell the heat. And she's warm already. Beauty. She's working. Well, I'll leave that cranked. I'm gonna see how long it takes to kind of warm up the garage a bit, but that's that. That was my first video. I'll probably post more of just once I build cabinets and a workbench here. I'm gonna probably put a big workout area along that wall, and obviously tons of storage for my family. But stay tuned and hit like if you found this useful.